In 2011, one of the best cards printed in the Pokémon trading card game, Rare Candy, would undergo a drastic nerf and rework. This rework of Rare Candy is one of the biggest in the game's history, and would forever change how the game was played. In today's video, I want to explore how this card thrived in the 2003 to 2010 period, and the reasons why it might have been nerfed in 2011. Rare Candy was introduced in 2003's EX Sandstorm set. It followed in the footsteps of base set's Pokémon Breeder training card in allowing basic Pokémon to bypass their Stage 1 form and evolve straight into a Stage 2 Pokémon. This effect is incredibly powerful for a couple of reasons. Typically, evolving into a Stage 2 from a basic Pokémon would take 3 total turns. On the first turn you put it down, it can't be evolved, so you require 1 turn to go into a Stage 1, and another turn to go into a Stage 2. Pokémon Breeder cut this requirement down to 2 turns since you could skip the Stage 1 and go straight to the Stage 2, but Rare Candy was another step above this, with its original printing allowing a basic Pokémon to be evolved on the turn it came into play. This meant that a Pokémon with Rare Candy could easily get Stage 2s on the board as early as turn 1, and refresh knocked out Pokémon Stage 2s with fresh replacements easily. Being able to skip the Stage 1 also means you don't need to play as many copies of the middle stage evolutions in your deck, nor do you have to have them in hand when you're evolving. The old Rare Candy also had the added effect of allowing Stage 1s to be evolved from a basic. While this may seem useless since you aren't skipping a stage, this could allow players to quickly cheat Stage 1s onto the board, oftentimes to take advantage of their Poké Power abilities. I think the best feature of the OG Rare Candy was Stage 2 decks' ability to tack other useful Stage 2 lines into their deck. With the turn limitation removed and there's no need to play a Stage 1 card, decks that already used Rare Candy for their Stage 2 line were easily able to slot in thin 2-card tech lines of another Stage 2 in their deck. We saw this in the first World Championship that Rare Candy was legal for, 2004 Worlds, where Chris Phillips' Blaziken deck used 1 Oddish and 1 Blossom to give the Fire deck an answer for its difficult Water-type matchups, as well as providing the deck with a valuable healing Poké Power that kept bulky Blazikens on board as long as possible. The 2004 format also gave us a sneak peek into how Rare Candy was going to define the game going forward, with tons of Stage 2 decks like Gardevoir, Swampert, Exploud, and Walrein being early adopters of Rare Candy, in addition to the aforementioned Blaziken. This format also gave us hints on how decks would punish other decks reliant on Rare Candy going forward, with hand disruption decks in the case of the Krobus deck, and de-evolution with the popular Ancient Technical Machine Rock card. Going into the 2005 season, Rare Candy would get even better with the release of Pidgeot from Fire Red and Leaf Green, which could find any card from the deck once per turn. Now every Stage 2 deck had the perfect consistency companion for them. Going forward, the 2005 to 2006 season was defined by Stage 2 decks that either used Pidgeot or went out of their way to counter Pidgeot. We'd also see the first evolving Stage 2 decks to not rely on Rare Candy, with the Dragtrode deck being given a useful Stage 1 Dragonair that circumvented the need for Rare Candy. Throughout the entire EX era, Rare Candy continued to succeed with a multitude of partners, especially enabling the EX Pokémon mechanic. Decks can usually only run 4 of a Stage 2 Pokémon, but an EX Pokémon had a different name, so if I ran 3 Flygon and 3 Flygon EX, for example, Rare Candy became even easier to use. Starting in the Diamond and Pearl era, cards would receive another round of power creep, which is usual for the start of each new era. While the cards were not doing more damage on average necessarily than cards from the EX era, the damage to energy ratio was higher, and they were all on single prize Pokémon. Look at Infernape from Diamond and Pearl, which was a speed deck that leveraged high and immediate damage to quickly overwhelm slower setup decks. The bigger Stage 2s like Empoleon, Rhyperior, and Torterra also broke HP records for regular Stage 2 Pokémon. As the Diamond and Pearl era continued, the effect-based power creep would set in fully, with the incredibly dominant Gardevoir Gallade deck that would dominate the 08 season. The incredible Claydol would also release, which enabled Stage 2s to quickly get into play by drawing a bunch of cards with this Cosmic Power Pokémon power. Its cosmic power was so strong that it was often worth using a Rare Candy to get Claydol into play earlier, just so you could start drawing cards with cosmic power to set up your other evolution Pokémon. Going into 2009, the Legends Awakened and Stormfront sets would unveil incredibly powerful and efficient Stage 2 cards, like Gengar, Kingdra, and Machamp. If there was any breaking point in the power of Stage 2 attackers, it was definitely here, as these 1 energy, efficient, and high damage threats dominated the early 09 season. Going into the Platinum era, evolutions got even more powerful with the release of Broken Timespace, which allowed Pokémon to evolve the turn that they were put into play. Broken Timespace was released to counteract the new SP mechanic, which were almost all basic Pokémon, so evolutions got a boost and basics got a boost at the same time. In a few decks, Broken Timespace's effect of allowing Pokemon to evolve instantly replaced Rare Candy, but many decks chose to run both Broken Timespace and Rare Candy since it allowed them to have an optimal evolution strategy even if they did not have the Stage 1 in hand. Going into the 2010 season, the Heart Gold Soul Silver era represented a changing time for the game, as many cards became much simpler than the previous 7 years of cards. Despite that, the power level of Stage 2s was not deterred, with many new excellent Pokémon Prime like Kingdra and Magnezone taking advantage of Broken Timespace and Rare Candy to attack for high damage very quickly. Finally, in the 2011 season, the nerf to Rare Candy would arrive with the transition to the Black and White era. As a reminder, the new Rare Candy cannot evolve a basic Pokémon on the first turn or the turn it was put into play. It also couldn't be used to cheat a Stage 1 Pokémon into play. But why was Rare Candy nerfed? The Diamond and Pearl metagames were for the most part fun and complex. While Stage 2 succeeded, Stage 1s and even Basics also succeeded, so they were pretty balanced in terms of different archetype representation. One of the main reasons I believe Rare Candy was nerfed was that the power of the Stage 2 attackers had increased. The previously mentioned Kingdra, Machamp, and Kingdra Prime, as well as Jumpluff from Heart Gold Soul Silver, were easily able to take knockouts on the first turn of the game if their player went second. Decks like Jumpluff especially relied on getting an early lead with a turn 1 knockout from Rare Candy and Broken Timespace to evolve instantly. If you could just take a knockout every single turn with Jumpluff, you would easily race the opponent to 6 prize cards and win. These decks were aided by the power of Cosmic Power Claydol's draw engine and Uxie's setup, which let them get easy turn 1 knockouts by finding plenty of cards from the deck. Another reason I think Rare Candy was nerfed is because it allowed for turn 1 item lock. In 2004 and 2005, this could be done by evolving Oddish into Vileplume EX on the first turn, but it was difficult not only to evolve into Vileplume EX and have all the pieces, but also to get it into the active spot on the first turn of the game. In the Heart Gold and Soul Silver era, we got a new Vileplume that did not need to be in the active spot to use its item-locking Allergy Flower Pokébody, and with Uxie's setup, Rare Candy, and Broken Timespace, it was pretty reasonable to get this set up on the very first turn of the game, if you went second. Instant Stage 2 evolution limits how Stage 2 abilities can be designed, when they can be drawn quickly and put into play on the first turn of the game. During the Diamond and Pearl and Platinum era, energy acceleration on Stage 2 Pokémon was much weaker than a card like Blastoise EX from the EX era, but this is a good thing because it'd be really easy to get a Stage 2 into play and attach multiple energy on the first turn of the game with the help of draw cards like the previously mentioned Claydol and Uxie. A card like Gardevoir EX from Scarlet and Violet, for example, is another card that can never really fairly exist in a turn 1 Candy metagame. Immediately after the Rare Candy nerf, Black and White debuted lots of powerful energy acceleration and powerful item locking abilities on Stage 2s, which I think illustrates my point that the designers were held back from bringing these out during the Diamond and Pearl era. Lastly, Rare Candy was probably nerfed due to Pokemon heading towards a more simplistic era of the game. This transition began with the Heart Gold and Soul Silver era, with most of each set being filled with filler cards with less text than the Diamond and Pearl or Platinum eras. The Pokémon Primes and this one Metagross are the only cards in the entire Heart Gold Soul Silver block that had 3 attributes on them, whereas lots of fully evolved Pokémon from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum had 3 attributes or even more when they were leveled up into a Pokémon level X. Black and White further simplified the games, with 0 3-attribute cards, the change to abilities, and the removal of all turn 1 restrictions. Nerfing Rare Candy helped shift the focus off of evolution-focused decks, which generally have more complex strategies and resource management than the basic Pokémon, which have simpler effects and few abilities. We'd see this shift finalized by the 2012 Worlds format, where Darkrai Mewtwo EX focused all basic decks, dominated the tournament, and for the following decade since, Rare Candy has remained with the same nerf. Being able to use Rare Candy during the Black and White era on the first turn of the game going first would have undoubtedly led to some problematic situations with the energy acceleration on cards like Emboar to power up attackers like Reshiram from Black and White. And while it's arguable that Rare Candy was not necessarily the fault of this, but rather the flawed rules of removing all turn 1 restrictions during Black and White, it is ultimately what led it to be, and it has not been changed since. Do you think a turn 1 rare candy should come back in some kind of form, maybe as an ace spec or with some kind of limitation on abilities? Or do you think this effect is fine as is, being limited to only being used once a Pokemon is in play for a turn? Let me know in the comment section down below, and thank you for watching another one of my video essays on the Pokemon trading card game. Do be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these type of videos, and look forward to my next greatest sets of all time video coming very soon.